Now, the beauty of Naruto is that there's so many different characters that have different backstories and different moves. And that's the beauty of a well fleshed out power system. As you get different elemental releases in Kekkei Genkai and Kekkei Mora and Kekkei Toda, the amount of moves that you can have is borderline unlimited. And thus, over the course of the entirety of Naruto, we've been served to over 2,000 jutsu. And while some of those jutsus we've seen hundreds, if not thousands of times, others we've only seen a couple. And this is a real shame, considering the fact that some of the jutsus that we only see once or twice are some of the most iconic and lovable jutsus in the entire universe. But whether it be because these jutsus belong to side characters or just because these jutsus are hard to draw or animate, we don't see them often, which is a shame because a lot of these jutsus that we see once or twice become a lot of people's favorite jutsus, which makes us feel that these jutsus that are used every once in a while are underutilized or undervalued by the Naruto universe. However, a jutsu only being used once or twice throughout the duration of Naruto isn't the only way that a jutsu might feel undervalued. See, some jutsus that are used in almost every single episode still feel undervalued. Everybody seems to be really passé about them when they could actually be one of the strongest jutsus in the universe, as different jutsus might have different applications that ninjas haven't explored, or the sheer mechanics of how a relatively simple jutsu works are actually incredibly complicated, and pulling that simple jutsu off in the first place is a Herculean task that we're just not talking about. Regardless of whether or not it's because of underutilization or underexploration, a lot of jutsus fall to the relative wayside. And these are the jutsus that I would describe as massively underrated. Jutsus which have the capacity to be some of the strongest jutsus in the Naruto universe, but we just don't see enough. Or jutsus that we do see used in one capacity, but could be massively more effective in a separate capacity. No matter how you slice it, these are jutsus that have more potential than what they were shown to live up to in the Naruto universe. And because of that, they deserve their time in the sun. Which is why today we're talking the top 10 underrated jutsus in Naruto, ranked and explained. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love me ranking and explaining things, then you're really gonna like my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I rank and explain things from all of their anime. And if you like the idea of me talking about all the anime that are out, then you're gonna love my anime podcast, Who Talk is Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So when somebody tells you, think of a jutsu from Naruto, what do you think of? It's probably something like Chidori, or Rasengan, or Shadow Clone Jutsu. And that's because those are the jutsus that we see used over and over and over again. Minato creates the Rasengan, teaches it to Jiraiya. Jiraiya teaches it to Naruto. Naruto, well, actually doesn't teach it to Boruto, but Boruto learns it eventually. Kakashi creates Chidori, which he teaches to Sasuke, which he teaches to Sarada. Orochimaru learns how to stretch his body in uncomfortable ways and kind of imprints that into Mitsuki. The reason that we see jutsus used over and over and over again, even across generations, is because drawing a bunch of new and original jutsu is not only mentally taxing, but also just kind of difficult. Having to think about a new, unique jutsu and how it works in the universe for every new fight, it's kind of tough. And while occasionally characters will use new and interesting jutsus, like Naruto and Sasuke combining their powers to create a more powerful version of the Black Flame, Amaterasu, Rasen Shuriken that they can toss across an entire battlefield and light up a bunch of 10-tailed clones, but the majority of the time we're going to be served as some different variation of Chidori or Rasengan. Because mangakas are historically overworked, and coming up with a new jutsu and the design of it every single week, pretty tough when you have to turn in 15 pages. And this isn't just a problem in Naruto. Even universes with incredibly fleshed out and awesome power systems like Hunter x Hunter and JJK are still privy to this kind of thing. Characters have movesets, and usually they stick to said movesets. In fact, when it comes to variety of moves used in universe, Naruto is actually probably number one. However, that doesn't mean that Naruto didn't forget some jutsu along the way. The problem with being number one in the amount of variety of moves that you depict in either your manga or anime is that there's gonna be some moves that are incredible that can just never be used again. And today, we're gonna be talking about those jutsu. Now, I've compiled a list of 10 jutsu that I believe are massively underrated, but I believe there's a lot more than 10 jutsu that are massively underrated in Naruto, so I gotta do at least one honorable mention. So before we get into our top 10, let me do my one honorable mention. See, people have been yelling at me for a long time to do a ranking and explaining video of all of the summons in Naruto, and I will do it one day. It's just a Herculean task, but if you sat me down and told me to rank and explain all of the summons based off my personal enjoyment, unfortunately, at number 1 would be a summon that we only see one time. And that's because my favorite summon in the entirety of the Naruto universe is Tamari's summon, also known as Kamatari. Kamatari is a weasel with a sickle and an eye patch. That's sick. Technically, Kamatari appears 4 times, 2 times in canon. The first time being Tamari's battle against Tayuya, where she swoops in and saves Shikamaru. Now, there's also a filler arc in part 1 of Naruto where she summons him, and there's also a filler fight in the 4th Great Shinobi World War where she summons him. However, the other time that we actually see Kamatari in canon is in Shikamaru's first light novel, Shikamaru Hiden, A Cloud Drifting in Silent Darkness. But filler or not, every single time that Kamatari has graced us with its presence, it has been incredible. Truly, if you only want to focus on the times that Kamatari gets summoned in canon, technically only one of those times is animated. And that one time was enough. See, Kamatari, when Tamari summons him to help in the battle against Tayuya, not only defeats Tayuya, who mind you has a genjutsu-inducing flute, giant goblins that she can control, and a level 2 curse mark, but also in the process of defeating Tayuya, Kamatari cuts down an entire forest. Not like a couple of trees, an entire forest as far as the eye can see, which is why Kamatari was so effective against Tayuya, because they were like, oh, she's in that general direction, kill everything in front of us. And Kamatari did it. Kamatari pretty much represents the highest level of wind release you can see in Naruto, and Tamari was summoning it at 13 years old. That's insane. Sure, summons like Gamabunta and Auda could probably destroy an entire forest if they wanted to, but they're also 400 feet tall. Kamatari is legitimately just the weasel with a sickle. Also, Kamatari probably destroyed the forest faster than the likes of Gamabunta or Auda could. So yeah, the fact that Kamatari only makes one canon manga appearance, criminal. I love him. I want a weasel with an eye patch and a sickle. But enough about my favorite summons, let's get to the actual top 10. Coming in our number 10 spot, I don't want to call it last because this jutsu is incredible, is Super Beast imitating drawing, or as it's known more colloquially, Super Beast Scroll. This is a technique used by Sai and Inajin, Sai's son. And while the jutsu was used in the anime and the manga a good amount, I mean Sai replaces Sasuke for a large amount of the manga, I don't believe it's talked about enough as one of the most powerful and dangerous jutsus out there. Mostly because Sai as a character is pretty largely forgot, which is why he was in the top 3 of underrated characters in Naruto for me. See, this jutsu in premise is pretty simple. It allows the user to create drawings and animate them. That is to say that the user is able to draw whatever they please, and with a simple confirmation seal, they're able to bring whatever they drew to life, and whatever drawn will act upon the user's will. Now, the common misconception here is that this technique is weak. I mean, all you really need to do is get some chakra-infused ink, do a little painting, and once the painting is done, the beast jumps off the scroll. But since these beasts are made of ink, one punch is usually enough to destroy them. And you're right, in that capacity, the technique is kind of weak. The durability of the monsters created isn't all that high. But what this ability lacks in raw strength and durability, it makes up for in versatility. See, Sai and Inajin can draw anything. Sai is able to do anything from turning words into small animals that can travel to a location, explode themselves, and confer a message, all incredibly discreetly, to creating massive birds that can carry Sai on their back and carry him somewhere at high speeds or allow him to battle in the air, to creating tigers that can launch out of a scroll, grab onto somebody, and slowly drag them into the scroll, sealing them in one of the strongest Fuinjutsus in the entire Naruto universe. Sai can create small black mice that can scout out entire areas and see enemy forces and then come back to them and report to them on everything that they've seen. Snakes that can enter buildings through tiny cracks soundlessly and carry out assassination missions for Sai. Fish who can swim across entire oceans to deliver a message on the other side of a body of water. Giant crabs, dragons, owls, anything. And while sure, the majority of these drawings can be destroyed in one punch, Sai can also create tons of drawings. And considering the fact that Sai was responsible for sealing some of the strongest ninjas in history when they were brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War through Edo Tensei, the strength of things like his tiger sealing technique are so strong that it doesn't matter who you are, if he gets his fangs in you, it's over. Combine that with years of assassination work, the ability to draw incredibly quickly, and a versatility that allows Sai to stay off of the battlefield, and you have an incredibly dangerous technique, and one that I believe doesn't get enough love. But with the shift in the tides of people like liking Sai more and more as time goes on. It's probably my fault because he's one of my favorite characters. I believe that this technique gets a lot more love than everything else on this list, which is why it's sitting at number 10. Let's get to the jutsus that nobody talks about, because coming in at number 9, we have the hiding with camouflage technique. It's a stupid name, I know, but the jutsu itself is incredibly powerful. This technique is kind of a derivative of transparent escape technique. Well, they're kind of the exact same thing. I can't tell which is derived from which. We've never actually seen transparent escape technique used in the manga, but we have seen hiding with camouflage used in the manga. For those of you who don't know what either of these techniques are, they're jutsus that make you invisible. Now, the transparent escape technique was created by Jiraiya so that he could watch women in the bath. You know, just Jiraiya things. What a horrifying and reality-shaking concept that one of the most powerful people in the universe used his ninjutsu prowess to essentially commit felonies. But since we have seen hiding with camouflage technique used in the manga and therefore in the anime and canon episodes, that's the one we're going to be talking about today. See, this technique allows a user to control the light around their body, which causes their form, shadow, and even breath to become invisible to the naked eye. However, it actually does a little bit more than this. It doesn't only make you invisible, it also camouflages your scent, which makes you almost impossible to see or even detect. In fact, the only way that somebody's able to detect somebody using the hiding with camouflage technique is by the sounds that they make. As regardless of whether or not you can be seen or smelt, if you step on a stick, you step on a stick. On top of this, people who use the Sharingan or the Byakugan can still see you, as it's not like you can erase your chakra signature, but still, the amount of people with a Byakugan or Sharingan relative to the entire population of the Naruto universe is next to nothing, making this one of the greatest reconnaissance, stealth, or assassination type jutsus in the entirety of Naruto. And there is one, yes, that's right, one manga canon user of this technique. Much in the same capacity as there's only one manga canon user of the transparent escape technique, and Jiraiya never actually even uses it in the manga. The only person who ever uses it in the manga is a man by the name of Taiseki from Iwa, one of the ninjas that Team Minato had to fight on the mission in the Third Great Shinobi World War that killed Obito. And mind you, the scent of the user is so well masked that Kakashi isn't able to smell him, and Kakashi is said to have a nose better than that of a ninja hound. Why this technique isn't taught in the Shinobi Academy, I will never know. The biggest part about being a ninja is being stealthy. While techniques like the Substitution Jutsu and the Transformation Jutsu are obviously important to your standard ninja-dumb tasks, being invisible would also be hugely helpful. And considering the fact that this technique has been made by two separate people in separate villages for separate purposes, it can't be that hard to create. Oh no, we're Team Tobirama deep in Hidden Cloud territory. We need to have somebody stay behind in order to fight off the 20 S-class ninja who are coming to kill all of us? What if we all just scatter and turn invisible for a little while? There are so many situations that this technique could have just saved the day, and yet 2 people know it. But speaking of techniques that only 2 people know in the manga, but many more know in the anime, we have our number 8 spot, the water prison jutsu. Now, the only 2 people who have ever been displayed to know how to use this move in canon are Kisame and Zabuza, which makes sense. They're 2 of the most legendary 7 swordsmen of the mist in the mist's history. And on top of being incredible kenjutsu masters, they're also incredible at water release. Now, this is a technique that has subdued Jinchuriki, Kakashi, Tenten, Neji, Rock Lee. Pretty much anybody who's ever been caught in the water prison jutsu was there for a good amount of time. See, the water prison jutsu can be used one of 2 ways. Either the user can draw from water sources around them to create a sphere of heavy water. The water is explicitly said to be heavy, and therefore, because the water is heavy, it makes it incredibly hard to move in this sphere and also hard to breathe, which is weird because regardless of how heavy the water is, if you're stuck in a sphere of water, you shouldn't be able to breathe. However, ninjas are weird, so apparently you can breathe within a sphere a little bit, but you don't even need a nearby water source. You can also just expel the water from your mouth to create the water prison jutsu. And since within the confines of this water prison, it's not only difficult to breathe, but also move, most people can escape on their own, which means if you catch somebody in this technique, that's pretty much the fight done. Now, obviously, people have been able to break out of this technique. Kisame in Akatsuki Hiden was able to break out of this technique by expelling water out of his body and increasing the volume of the water prison until it was at a level that it couldn't maintain. But somebody trying to catch Kisame in a water prison jutsu was stupid in the first place. Then Neji was also able to escape this technique on his own by firing chakra out from all of his Tenketsu points simultaneously, kind of like creating a pseudo-rotation without the rotation. But unless the person that you're trying to capture is a master of gentle fists or probably the strongest water ninjutsu user in the entire universe, if you catch somebody in this technique, that's it. Now, some will say that this technique is weak because in order to maintain the water prison, you have to keep an arm in the water prison the entire time. However, anybody who's able to use this water prison jutsu is also able to use water clones. And therefore, all you have to do to maintain this technique is create a water clone who will keep its arm in the water prison to maintain the water prison, and you're good. You can run around. And you know what you can do while your water clone is maintaining that water prison? You can line up your most powerful ninjutsu, taijutsu, or genjutsu attack on the person who's stuck in a bubble of water they can't leave from. Or you could just inject some poison into the water that they're going to be forced to have to inhale. So long as there isn't some scrappy kids turning themselves into demon shurikens, you're probably going to be fine. And you've probably won the fight. And yet we only ever see 2 people use this technique, Kisame and Zabuza. And that's just weird because it's a C rank jutsu. Not only people from the mist can use this, it's not even a hard water ninjutsu to use. But enough about jutsus that everybody could use. Let's talk about specific family-oriented hidden jutsus that only one clan can use. Because coming in at number 7, we could have just the Aburame clan as a whole, or maybe just parasitic destruction insect technique, but I'll try to be more specific. So coming in at number 7, we have the Rinkai and the Kaichew. Now the Rinkai and the Kaichew are 2 different kinds of bugs that are utilized by the Aburame family, but both are technically bugs available in Shino's arsenal. See, the Rinkai is a bug that was originally introduced to belong to Tsurune Aburame, the right-hand man of Danzo, and it's a nano-sized purple bug that creates an incredibly powerful flesh-eating toxin. So all Tsurune has to do is manifest his Rinkai to his skin, and anybody he touches is infected with this toxin that eats away at their skin way too fast. Basically, if you're touched by Tsurune's Rinkai, you will lose whatever he touches, as the toxin begins to eat away at flesh and bone instantaneously. Now, Shino is technically compatible with the Rinkai. However, he didn't really vibe with the violence of it. However, he does still technically work with the Rinkai. See, instead of becoming a host to the Rinkai in a normal sense, Shino crossbred Tsurune's Rinkai with his own bugs, giving his bugs the ability to create an antibody to the toxin while also technically being able to create the toxin as well. Which means in a somewhat roundabout capacity, Shino has access to the Rinkai, as well as having an access to the cure for the Rinkai toxin. Which means, in essence, Shino has crossbred nano-sized bugs with his regular bugs and given his regular bugs the ability to create a toxin that once it is injected into your body will eat away at it instantaneously until you are nothing. And what does he do with that? Well, he fights against Tsurune and wins, but after that, pretty much nothing, which is insane. Outside of that, Shino also has access to a bug known as the Kaichew, which is constantly feeding off his chakra, like the rest of the bugs in his body. However, the Kaichew needs to be fed an exact amount of chakra, and if it's not fed that exact amount of chakra, it will consume as much chakra as it can get and grow in size, exponentially and instantaneously. Which means that if hypothetically Shino were to inject these bugs into your body and you didn't know how much chakra to feed them, which you wouldn't, you would explode from the inside because a bug the size of a boulder just appeared in your chest. Once again, incredibly broken. It's basically how everybody wanted Ant-Man to defeat Thanos. And these are 2 abilities that can't be absorbed by things like a Rinnegan or a Karma Mark because they're physical matter. They're not jutsu, meaning that Shino is pretty much the only person on Earth with a kit that's advantageous against people like the Otsutsuki, as all he would have to do to permanently cripple an Otsutsuki is either touch them with the Rinkai or get one Kaichew into them, and then bye. And yet Shino has been relegated to wearing shutter shades like he's 2012 Kanye and losing in battles to Mitsuki, which is insane when you consider the fact that in universe he should be one of the most powerful people in existence. But enough about jutsus that entire clans can use. Let's talk about jutsus that only one person can use. Because coming up at number 6, we have Body Pathway Derangement. Now technically, while Sakura can use this move in video games, Tsunade is the only person in the anime and the manga depicted to have mastered this technique. And kind of thank God for that. See, the reason that Tsunade is the only person who's mastered this technique is because it's a high-level medical ninjutsu. And Tsunade is a high-level medical ninjutsu specialist. In order to use this technique, Tsunade, essentially like Killua, transmutes her chakra into an electrical field, giving her chakra the properties of electricity. However, instead of using this technique to increase her offensive or defensive output like the Raikage or increase her speed like Killua, Tsunade uses this technique to pour her electrified chakra into somebody's nervous system via physical touch. touch, which allows her to rearrange somebody's nervous system, making it so any electrical system in their body is misfire. And those affected by this technique will have their body do anything other than what their brain is trying to tell their body to do. Meaning if you try to move your hand, anything but your hand will move. And if this move is used against anybody, it's pretty much GG's. Tsunade stated that after getting hit by this technique, it's almost impossible to move, let alone fight. And honestly, I tend to agree. Even if I knew that in order to move my left foot, I had to think about moving my right hand, I probably couldn't do it. Definitely not in a capacity in which I could walk or run or throw a punch or fight. And what does Tsunade have to do to pull off this technique? Touch ya. But some techniques don't even require physical touch to pull off. Like our number 5 jutsu on this list, Mind-Body Disturbance Jutsu. See, if I ask you what the biggest problem with the Yamanaka clan is, what would you say? The fact that they can transfer their body into 1, maybe 2 people and then their body goes limp? And thus in order for them to truly reach their peak of efficiency, they need somebody around to carry their unconscious body, which in the grand scope of a place like a war seems like a huge inconvenience. Well, what if I told you that them using their mind transfer jutsu was made entirely irrelevant by another jutsu that they know? See, the Yamanaka have an ability that doesn't transfer their minds into other people, but it still accomplishes the desired effect. And that technique is known as the mind-body disturbance technique, where the Yamanaka clan member is able to send their chakra into somebody else's body to control their nervous system, giving them full control over somebody's body. And while they may not have control over their thoughts and mind and the intel in that head, they're able to control people's bodies. And not just one person, multiple people simultaneously. And instead of their body going limp and them needing to be carried somewhere safe, they retain full consciousness, meaning that this technique is perfect if a Yamanaka member is outnumbered or alone, as a Yamanaka clan member can use this technique against multiple people to have those people kill each other. And the worst part is, since their minds aren't being controlled, all the people being controlled retain consciousness. So even if they survive, they have to live with the confusion and the trauma of having to cut down their teammates. Kind of like the king or any of the guards from Dressrosa being forced to cut down all of the civilians as Doflamingo took it over. And while I understand that Yamanaka clan members are actually more useful in the collection of intel than the taking out of enemies, the fact that the Yamanakas have an ability that allows them to cut down entire groups of people without losing their consciousness, and they use it, what, once, maybe twice throughout the duration of the entire manga, is mind-blowing to me. In fact, Ino in the manga is never shown using it. Only her father, Anoichi, is shown using it. Not to mention, just like all other Yamanaka abilities, this technique can be used from a distance, which means you could just be standing with your group of ruffians and then you're being controlled to stab said ruffians, which could sow a massive amount of discord in a group of people. But speaking of killing massive groups of people simultaneously, coming in at number 4, somewhat appropriately, we have C4. See, when I tell you to think of Datara's moveset, what do you think of? His C2 dragon, his C1 bird, his little spiders, his lanky people, his C3 mega bomb? Do you maybe think about his C0 when he fed his own explosive clay to his heart mouth and exploded himself in a massive kilometer-wide explosion that killed Auda, or Manda, it killed Manda. Regardless of what you think about, most people don't think about Datara's C4. And that's because we only ever see Datara use his ability once. Oh wait, no, that's not true. We see him use like a tiny little chibi version in his battle against Sanoki after he's brought back to life in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. But we only see him use it at the peak of its power once. And unfortunately, when he uses it, it doesn't really do all that much. See, Datara's C4 technique was created to defeat Itachi one day, as Datara hated Itachi because Itachi was the reason that he got recruited into the Akatsuki. Now, the way that the technique works is that Datara expels a ton of explosive clay from his mouth. And all of that explosive clay that he essentially throws up forms a massive clone of him. However, this clone doesn't explode in a traditional sense. This clone blows up like a balloon and then pops. However, when this balloon pops, it releases a cloud of nano-sized bombs, which when inhaled, Datara will explode, which will vaporize anything that had the grave misfortune of inhaling them. Now, this is a terrifying jutsu, so scary that even Obito said it was a fearsome jutsu, because to most people, they would see a massive clone of Datara made of explosive clay and would think, oh, that's gonna be a really big explosion. And then it doesn't explode. It pops, which leads a lot of people into a false sense of security. Now, if you didn't have a Byakugan or a Sharingan, you wouldn't see any of the micro-sized bombs. However, because Sasuke sees chakra as color, he sees the massive cloud of bombs coming towards him, which allows him to electrify all of the bombs as they run through his system. Now, anybody without a dojutsu that allowed them to see chakra would die to this, especially if Datara were to set this off in, oh, I don't know, the middle of a village, or in the middle of a group of shinobi who would be thankful for 2 seconds that the massive Datara didn't explode only to turn into ash so they got snapped away by Thanos. Datara just had the explicit misfortune of using this against Sasuke. But I guess in actuality, the technique was supposed to be used against Itachi, who also would have been able to see the cloud, but whatever. All that really matters is that this technique is massively underrated and very scary, as the level of destruction that it's able to output is similar to that of C0 without it costing Datara's life. And for that, C4, very appropriately, gets the 4 spot. But enough about that pretty femboy, let's talk about another pretty femboy, because coming in at number 3, we have Demonic Mirroring Ice Crystals. Demonic Mirroring Ice Crystals is one of the first Kekkei Genkai that we ever see. Well, I should say that Ice Release is one of the first Kekkei Genkai that we ever see, and Demonic Mirroring Ice Crystals is an application of Ice Release. But Demonic Mirroring Ice Crystals is the highest level of Ice Release that we ever get to see from Haku, truly his magnus opus. See, this technique is only able to be performed by members of the Yuki clan, as they are the wielders of Ice Release. And this technique, even though it showed up in the early days of Naruto, is still an incredibly intimidating technique. Haku and Zabuza don't get enough credit for actually being legitimately powerful foes. See, in order to create this technique, Haku creates a dome of ice mirrors around an opponent. And by simply entering into one of these mirrors, Haku's reflection is shown in every single one. Now, the wildest part about this technique is that Haku has the ability to travel between these mirrors near instantaneously, which is crazy, because for all intents and purposes, it's a space-time ninjutsu. Haku is essentially reverse summoning himself to every single ice mirror that he creates. He doesn't have to physically travel from one, he teleports, which gives Haku the ability to appear to be everywhere all at once. And thus anybody with the grave misfortune of finding themselves in the center of this Senbon hell is thus filled with Senbon, as Haku can jump from mirror to mirror to mirror, tossing Senbon constantly and filling you with needles. Now, technically, was this the strongest possible application of this mirror jutsu? Probably not. See, we understand that this jutsu requires a lot of chakra from Haku, and therefore he can't do it forever. However, he doesn't really need forever, because even if you get lucky and strike the mirror that Haku happens to be in, once that mirror is broken, Haku can just jump out one of the mirror fragments into another mirror. And even if you can track what mirror Haku is in, I'll remind you he can travel near instantaneously, which would mean he can probably get to a new mirror faster than you can track and react to. Now, as we know, throwable weapons in Naruto really don't do much. People get filled with kunai and shuriken and senbon all the time and are completely fine. I mean, look at Sasuke in the Land of Waves are. However, if hypothetically Haku were to throw something more dangerous than a senbon, like an explosive tag, he could pretty easily wipe out anybody with the misfortune of being in his dome. And when we consider the fact that the first data book said that Haku travels at light speed between his mirrors, a bunch of explosive tags coming at you from light speed in all different directions would be terrifying. Now, obviously, the things thrown don't come in at light speed, because Naruto, with his first Jinchuriki form, was able to dodge the senbon being thrown by Haku. But considering the fact that the majority of the senbon were not dodged, if the majority of the senbon were kunai with explosive seals attached to them, fight would have ended differently. Now we know what you're saying. You're saying,
Nick, but Haku can't throw explosive seals in his dome. It'll destroy his mirrors.
probably not, considering the fact that Haku's mirrors were able to stand up against Sasuke's fireball technique. In fact, pretty much the only thing that we saw that was able to destroy one of Haku's mirrors was Naruto in his early Jinchuriki state. Haku technically wouldn't even have to go so far as using explosive seals. He could just dip his senbon in poison, 3 or 4 of those bad boys into somebody's back, and see you later. In premise, it's a borderline unstoppable jutsu. And unless you are a light speed opponent or able to track light speed movement, you're gonna lose. Or you're able to buff your defenses to such a level that Senbon can't penetrate. What's crazy is that Haku doesn't technically need to make this dome. Haku can just make a mirror next to somebody and teleport himself to it. Thus, in essence, his demonic ice crystal mirror technique is basically flying Raijin, though on a much smaller scale, admittedly. But because of that, it's vastly underrated. It's viewed as a technique that 2 Genin were able to overcome, like those 2 Genin were reincarnations of gods. But let's move away from techniques known by few to techniques known by all. Because coming in at number 2, we have a technique that probably every single ninja in the Naruto universe knows, but for some reason stopped using. And that technique would be none other than Substitution Jutsu, also known as the body replacement jutsu. This technique is weird. See, because here's the thing. It's kind of common knowledge that everybody in the entire Naruto universe knows the Substitution Jutsu. But why? And how does it work? Genuinely, we never get an explanation. But the craziest thing about the Substitution Jutsu is that you don't have to replace yourself with something like a log. It's just a lot of people do that. And we know this because the Substitution Jutsu isn't always a log. And sometimes, while it is a log, it's a log covered in explosive tags. See, the way that the substitution technique works, at least so far as we know, is that right before you're hit, you replace your body with something nearby, whether it be a rock or a log. It just has to be something. Now, the reason that it's important that it is something you replace your body with is because when people punch that something, it feels like something. It doesn't just poof like a shadow clone. And because of this, people believe that they hit you only to realize that they punched a log or a rock, which gives you a temporary window to counterattack. But here's the thing about Substitution Jutsu. The speed, the foresight, and the jutsu knowledge required to pull it off in the first place is kind of insane. So right before you get hit, you grab something else, use transformation jutsu on it so fast that the person who's hitting you doesn't even realize that it's not you. That's insane. And some people go so far as to not only grab things, but also coat said things in explosive seals. How fast do you have to be to pull that off? Because there's no way every single ninja is running around with a log on them. They have to grab it. And that log is always cut. So is it sealed? Are they opening a scroll, unsealing a log, replacing their body with it, using transformation jutsu on it, and then hiding their real body so fast that you can't react to it? But what's wild is that the substitution jutsu appears to be a reflex. See, the substitution jutsu only works on attacks that are meant to injure. Every attack meant to restrain or seal, we've never seen somebody substitute out of. It's only attacks that are meant to injure or maim or kill that have ever been substituted out of. And therefore, is the substitution jutsu an innate response to a deadly attack? And once again, the speed required to pull this off is absolutely insane. See, because here's the thing, you can't plan to use the substitution jutsu. If you use transformation jutsu on a log, that log can't move. It's not like you're turning the log into a shadow clone. You're just making the log look like you. If you could give that log sentience, that's a jutsu we don't yet know. And thus the counter argument of, oh, everybody's setting it up before because they know they're gonna get hit, doesn't work, because a log transformed to look like you couldn't have gotten that situation in the first place. And thus, while the substitution jutsu is obviously phased out in the later stages of Naruto, the fact that it was ever used in the first place is insane. But to be able to use this jutsu effectively in the first place, one would have to know transformation jutsu. Which brings us to our number one entry on this list, transformation jutsu. See, I've long stood in the camp that transformation jutsu is by far and away the most insane out of all of the jutsus in Naruto. And not even just because everybody knows it, which is crazy, but because of the things that we've seen transformation jutsu do. See, in its basis most refined form, transformation jutsu gives somebody the ability to look like somebody else. And while there are technically ways to see through a transformation jutsu, like scent or mannerisms or chakra signature, but here's the thing, the capabilities of the transformation jutsu go beyond being able to turn yourself into any human you want to, which is an insane possibility in the first place, mind you. I mean, genuinely, all I have to do is familiarize myself with how somebody looks and walks and I can be them. That's kind of crazy. And while obviously transformation jutsu is technically still a very difficult jutsu, even though it's one of the ones required to graduate from the Shinobi Academy, there are higher levels of application to it than just turning into somebody else. See, ninjas, outside of being able to transform into somebody else, also have the capability to turn into inanimate objects. A ninja could turn into a houseplant or a fence or a demon shuriken, which is insane. This means that conservation of mass does not exist in the Naruto universe, and that's corroborated multiple times. One, in the early days of Naruto, Naruto turns into a demon shuriken, and thus Sasuke throws him, and Zabu's like, well, dodge that one, but joke's on you, it's actually Naruto. And while the prospect of turning into a weapon might seem kind of silly, some people take it to genuinely the nth degree. A great example of this is Monkey King Enma, who's able to turn into an adamantite staff. See, here's the thing about Monkey King Enma, a flesh-in-blood monkey turning into an adamantite staff. This means that masters of the transformation technique are able to rearrange their molecular structure, which makes sense. We literally just talked about a boy turning into a shuriken. And adamantite is the strongest material in Naruto. It's the vibranium of the Naruto universe. This is why the Uzumaki chains are adamantite chains. It's the strongest Fuinjutsu ability you could create because it's made using the strongest material on Earth. This is why even Kurama isn't able to break out of these chains, because because they're basically impossible to break. Monkey King Enma as an adamantite staff is so powerful that he's able to block attacks from Orochimaru's Blade of Kusanagi, which is said to be able to cut through anything. And thus, adamantite is basically impossible to penetrate or break through. And Monkey King Enma, after undergoing his transformation into an adamantite staff, was also able to use Shadow Clone Jutsu, and thus was able to create a cage out of adamantite staffs that was able to block a deep forest emergence from Hashirama, which is one of the most powerful jutsus in all of Naruto, bar none. So not only are ninjas able to turn into inanimate objects, but they're also able to restructure their molecular structure to make their bodies incomprehensibly hard. And to keep the double entendres going, not only can Monkey King Enma make his entire body hard, he can also lengthen it indefinitely, as Monkey King Enma as an adamantite staff is infinitely extendable. That's how Hiruzen was able to push Kurama out of Konoha. And thus, not only is there no conservation of matter for a ninja undergoing the transformation jutsu, but there's also the complete and total ability to restructure your molecular structure, meaning there's technically no limit to what you should be able to turn into using transformation technique, which once again is kind of corroborated by the fact that Naruto uses transformation technique on Gamabunta and turns him into Kurama. So you, using transformation technique, can just make tailed beasts. Will they know how to use tailed beast bombs? No. Will they have 9 powerful tails, fangs, and claws? Yeah. So the real question becomes, why isn't everybody constantly making big animals into tailed beasts? And do we even need to use big animals to turn into tailed beasts? Since we know that conservation of mass isn't a thing, why aren't we turning ourselves into tailed beasts?
Nick, there's an upper limit on how much they can change their mass.
Is there? If you can go from a flesh and blood monkey to the hardest metal on Earth, which is substantially denser, and extend yourself indefinitely, I don't think there is an upper limit. There also doesn't appear to be a lower limit. You know who weighs way more than a demon shuriken probably? Child Naruto. Why are we not constantly seeing people change into vastly different inanimate or animate objects? Oh no, you found out I was impersonating one of the ninjas on your team. Too bad I'm 9 foot tall now. See, that's the craziest part to me. Even if we assume that you can't just turn yourself into a 9-foot giant, if you know what Kisame looks like, you could turn yourself into Kisame, and sure, you don't get his strength or his jutsus, but you still have your jutsus and you have his size. How do we not see it more often? Technically, what's stopping people from making a Susanoo? I mean, it is just a chakra construct. What's stopping me from turning into a bird and flying to the next country, right? I mean, like think about it for 2 seconds. If Gamabunta can be Kurama, why can't I be a bird? Sure, you have to familiarize yourself with what a bird feels like and how it operates. Own a bird for a week. Everybody in Naruto should be Beast Boy, just like based off the rules as they've been depicted. And the fact that they weren't is probably a good thing, but also baffling. And I will never shut up about it. What do you guys think? What are some underutilized or underappreciated jutsu in Naruto that you think should have got more screen time? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, Naruto still remembers what Kurama looks like. He could just be Kurama for a day.